background. You will have lowest reactionary assumptions, highest awakened response, alive response for life continuously. E-Kailasa is enlightenment ecosystem, literally enlightenment itself in your own home, wherever you are. Proper customized spiritual service helping you to complete with your life negativity, withdrawal from life, self-hatred, self-denial, self-doubt, so much of tiredness, laziness. We can support you aligning your diet, your attitude, your aptitude, your understanding about life. We can help you with everything. If you are interested in enlightenment, we will immediately bring this to you. If you are not interested, we will explain the whole science, inspire you, and make you interested in enlightenment science. We need to cater this enlightenment science to the whole world wherever they are, because enlightenment is the birthright of all human beings. Kailasa is responsible to provide that to all human beings. Kailasa is the totality of the knowledge I received from my gurus and practice manifested in my life, perfected by teaching millions of people from all cultures, time zones, backgrounds, genders, nationality, race, from every creed. So this absolutely perfected knowledge available to you, served to you in your home without even you moving out of your couch, free of cost. What I mean by the word E-Kailasa, listen intensely. Enlightenment ecosystem, literally enlightenment itself in your own home, wherever you are. If you cannot come to Kailasa, it's okay. Kailasa can come to you. Kailasa coming to you is E-Kailasa.
Nityanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Ganadadasham Tadvamastyadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadhi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. Nityanandam, did you know over 25% of women under the age of 50 have been subjected to physical and or sexual violence by their intimate partner at least once in their lifetime? This means that you probably know someone who is going through this cycle of violence. However, many do not know how to speak about it. Many fear the reactions from people around them if they were to share about it. Many do not know how to come out of it and do not feel supported by the society. That is why we have gathered here today on this very important day, November 25th, which was declared by the United Nations as the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls. So today, on behalf of the sovereign state of Sri Kailasa and with the blessings of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Jagat Guru Mahasannidhanam, His Divine Holiness Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam, we welcome each and every one of you to take part in this very important discussion, which literally has the power to change lives. The delegates of Sri Kailasa, Ma Nitya Katitananda, Ma Nitya Mahakatitananda, and Ma Nitya Swatantra Priyananda, and myself, Vijaya Priya Nityananda, welcome our esteemed guest panelist, Dr. Richard Middleton Kaplan, who is joining our panel for the second time. Dr. Richard Middleton Kaplan, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. So we welcome each and every one of you joining us online through various social media platforms and invite you to share your experiences live. Together, let us give a voice to women and girls who may not be able to speak up. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is giving the solutions. Now, let us share these solutions with the world so that we can create a world in which women and girls are respected and provided with the necessary resources to actively contribute and thrive in all fields. Empowering women and girls around the world will lead to a peaceful and sustainable future for all.
Who is the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism? Jagat Guru Mahasannidhanam, His Divine Holiness, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam, was born on January 3rd, 1978. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is the reviver of Kailasa, the ancient enlightened civilization, the great cosmic borderless Hindu nation. And now born and practicing Hindus from around the world have a safe haven to practice their religion and lifestyle free from the fear of persecution. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is the 1008th incarnation of Paramashiva as per Hinduism, recognized by his predecessors who are enlightened masters and adepts. Having an incarnation among us, guiding us, is extremely rare and an extraordinary blessing. The last incarnation was Lord Krishna, who happened 5,000 years ago. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has made the science of power manifestation, yoga, and temple-based universities available for humanity, giving free access to education for all. The Sovereign Order of Kailasa, led by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, and the Nityananda Order of monks, nuns, and Hindu diaspora are working for global peace and to give a super conscious breakthrough to humanity. As the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism tells all of us, life is for others and we should go on contributing.
The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, at the young age of 3, was already recognized as an incarnation of Paramashiva by his predecessors of masters and adepts. And at the age of 16, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was coronated to establish Sri Kailasa, the only first nation of Hindus. And in 2015, he was elected as the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism by a congregation of over 1,000 leaders or pontiffs and the spiritual leader of 2 billion Hindu diaspora worldwide. So some of the titles, for lack of a better term, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism holds are as follows. He is the 233rd Guru Mahasanidhanam, Pontiff of Kanchi Kailasa Sarvanyapitam, Tonde Mandala Adhinam, and the 1008 Acharya Mahamandaleshwara, the head for all spiritual leaders of Atal Akada, the ancient apex body of Hinduism. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is also the 203rd Emperor and the present 293rd Jagadguru Mahasanidhanam, Pontiff of Kailasonata Shamalapita Sarvanyapitam. He is also the present Mahamandaleshwara, Supreme Spiritual Head of Mahanirvani Akada, the largest apex monastic order, and is the present 23rd Guru Mahasanidhanam of Dharma Mukti Swargapuram Adhinam.
The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has dedicated his life to serve others. For the past 27 years of his public life, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism sincerely worked to provide an enlightened ecosystem for communities all around the world. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism inspired over 30 million Hindus to revive the non-violent-based enlightened ecosystem by sharing the authentic knowledge as per the Veda Agamas and giving direct experiences to millions around the world through initiation. If you are listening today, you may be among the millions of people who have themselves experienced the unimaginable transformation in their lives after being initiated by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. So we invite you to share your experiences with all of us through social media, and specifically on this very important day for the elimination of violence against women, we invite you to share how the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's teachings are the solution to put an end to the cycle of violence that women and girls are subjected to on a daily basis, and which is often very not reported. So the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is for peace, and the data recorded till date proves it. Since initiating the Minutes for Peace meditation in 2003, over 4.3 billion minutes in meditation have been recorded. And the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism also launched the No Hungry Home project to help eradicate world hunger. And the statistics speak for themselves. Since the last 27 years, 1 billion free meals have been served globally. What did the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism do to help the community sail through the pandemic? He opened his monasteries as a sanctuary for thousands of families during COVID, providing multi-layer quarantine facilities with all amenities provided free of cost, which have also been mentioned in the Kailasa's report on COVID-19 and multilateralism, the United Nations recently published. Finally, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism authored more than 1,000 books and over 10,000 articles published since 2003 in 3 languages, translated in 50 languages, and a large global presence of over 1 billion views with over 10,000 hours of free discourses available online.
In 2003, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism founded the Nityananda Hindu University, which is the world's largest Hindu university with 1.65 million enrollments, 2,700 courses, with 450 extended campuses in more than 150 countries, over 10,000 hours of spiritual discourses on ancient, rare spiritual manuscripts. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is also a strong advocate of vegetarianism, which is a key for a sustainable future. He's a strong defender and upholder of women and LGBTQ+ rights. And despite various attacks on him for doing so, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has never wavered from his commitment. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has built 11 temples in North America and 150 temples around the world: Toronto, Los Angeles, San Jose, Seattle, Houston, St. Louis, Columbus, New Jersey, Charlotte, Phoenix, Oklahoma. More than 10,000 free meals are served daily. Over 250,000 programs conducted, and free daily yoga and meditation classes.
So let's begin by defining violence against women and girls, or in short, VAWG. The Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, issued by the United Nations General Assembly in 1993, defines violence against women and girls as any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. According to the United Nations, violence against women and girls is one of the most widespread, persistent, and devastating human rights violations in our world today, and it remains largely unreported due to the impunity, silence, stigma, and shame around it. Violence against women and girls can take various forms, such as physical, sexual, and psychological. Keeping in mind that this is not an exhaustive list, we will focus on the following acts of violence against women, namely intimate partner violence or domestic violence, sexual violence and harassment, including cyber harassment, human trafficking, such as slavery and sexual exploitation, female genital mutilation, and child marriage.
So by now, I'm sure many of you are thinking, I did not know there were all these forms of violence, including digital violence. So let us look at some statistics regarding these issues, and some may be quite interesting and surprising. So in terms of intimate partner violence, or IPV, sexual violence and harassment, which includes cyberbullying or the presence of digital violence, as mentioned before, over 25% of women between the age of 15 and 19 who have been in a relationship have been subjected to either physical abuse or sexual violence by their intimate partner at least once in their lifetime. So this means roughly every 1 out of 4 women that you know have been subjected to some form of sexual violence or abuse by a partner. So now, based on these statistics, we see that while the IPV, or the intimate partner violence, exists widely in developing countries, it also exists across developed countries and high-income countries or regions, such as the Americas and European regions, with up to 25% of women being victims to this form of violence. Now, in terms of digital violence, and something we may have not, even thought about until recently with the COVID crisis, a survey of women from 51 countries done by the Economist Intelligence Unit found that among the different threat tactics deployed to harass women online, misinformation and defamation were the most prevalent. So in this survey, it was found that roughly 2/3, or 67%, of the online harassment of women were linked to the spreading of rumors or slander to discredit or damage a woman's character. And in the UN report published on September 2020 by Luciano D'Amico, who is an independent researcher in the field of women's political leadership, and this is really, really interesting. It reports that female politicians and political activists in this respect are the easy and frequent targets, with online threats, harassment, graphic sexual taunts, sometimes amplified by armies of trolls and bots being used to delegitimize, depersonalize, ultimately dissuade them from being politically active. And recently, we've been seeing more frequent happenings of this, which is quite disturbing. And in addition to the surveys and reports mentioned, another recent survey of women parliamentarians found that 41.8%, so over 40% of the respondents had seen extremely humiliating or sexually charged images of them spreading throughout social media, including photo montages of them being nude. So how do they do all of this? Well, as much as technology has helped improve the quality of life throughout the years, it has also been used to carry out negative actions or harmful actions to such a point where certain tools, programs, apps can now be used to even morph not only images but also videos. Deepfake videos use a form of artificial intelligence called deep learning to make images of fake events. Now, many are pornographic in nature, and unfortunately, this was one of the strategic tools which was used against the female monks of our own community. And all of this has been clearly detailed in one of Kailas's reports published by the United Nations on disinformation. And we'll be speaking a little bit more about this shortly. And these forms of violence also includes sexualization and objectification, which is seeing or treating another person, usually a woman, as an object.
So let us now look at human trafficking, modern slavery, and sexual exploitation. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime reported that the vast majority of all human trafficking victims, about 71%, are women and girls, and a third are children. Further, the UNODC Executive Director Yuri Fedotov explains that trafficking for sexual exploitation and for forced labor remain the most prominently detected forms, but victims are also being trafficked to be used as beggars for forced or sham marriages, benefit fraud, or production of pornography. And female genital mutilation, where at least 200 million girls and women have been cut in 30 countries, representative data on prevalence according to the UNICEF, a dire violation of human rights, and particularly targeting women and children's rights. And also child marriage. According to the United Nations, 37,000 girls are under the age of 18 and are married each day. So 1 in 3 girls in the developing world are married before 18, and 1 in 9 are married before the age of 15. Globally, almost 400 million women now aged 20 to 49 were married before the age of 18. And this leads us to the risk factors for both intimate partner violence and sexual violence, which include lower levels of education, a history of exposure of child maltreatment, witnessing family violence, antisocial personality disorder, harmful use of alcohol, lower level of gender equality, harmful masculine behaviors, misogynistic society, discriminatory laws, and community norms that privilege or ascribe higher status to men and lower status to women. And last, low levels of women's access to paid employment.
As mentioned earlier, the United Nations reported that violence against women and girls is one of the most widespread, persistent, and devastating human rights violations in our world today, and it remains largely unreported due to the impunity, silence, stigma, and shame surrounding it. So now, of course, there are many ways in which each and every one of us can help. And today, on this International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls, we would like to warmly welcome our esteemed guest panelist, Dr. Richard Middleton Kaplan. Welcome. Dr. Middleton Kaplan is the Dean of Arts and Sciences at Walla Walla Community College in Washington State. Dr. Middleton Kaplan has published articles and taught in the United States and England about the literature of peace and nonviolence, literature of war, literature of the Nazi Holocaust, and literature and human rights. As a member of the Humanities Washington Speakers Bureau, Dr. Middleton Kaplan often speaks about literature and human rights. So now we invite Dr. Middleton Kaplan to share valuable insights on how various works of literature can help expose the hidden cycles of violence, such as those highlighted by the facts we have just presented, Dr. Middleton Kaplan, it is a real pleasure to have you with us once more. So we wish to ask you this question. In what ways do you feel literature can help bring awareness to human rights violations?
Thank you for that very kind introduction. I'm honored to be part of this program. Literature can bring awareness by taking us inside the experiences of people who have suffered the same things that we do, so that we realize that we're not alone. For example, a fictional work about a woman who has suffered domestic violence, such as the story Women Hollering Creek by Sandra Cisneros, can help a woman like the protagonist who's been a victim and feel alone, realize that she's not alone and that there are other people in the world who've experienced that. And for those of us who have not experienced that kind of trauma, the way that literature takes us inside the mind, the thoughts, the feelings of a person that we might never have a chance to talk to in our lives and might never learn about directly, because so much of this is engulfed in silence, can help us then understand, empathize with that experience, and motivate us to take action. Literature, I should say the modern novel, and not the modern Indian novel, but the modern European novel and the modern human rights movement both came about at the same historical time in the late 18th century. And the work of human rights would have been difficult to accomplish without literature instilling empathy and understanding in people about others who are very different from themselves, or allowing identification. And so if one can find in fiction characters who make sense of trauma, who come to terms with it, who understand how to cope with it, who learn how to become empowered, then we can follow that example ourselves. And we can be motivated to take action by the injustices that literature brings home to us in ways that perhaps a news item does not.
Thank you so much for sharing these valuable insights, Dr. Middleton Kaplan. As you said, literature really can create this sense of empathy, using your own words, correct? Like to help expose a situation that may be happening, but that we may not be aware of, or even if we know, we cannot fully relate to it because it hasn't happened to us, right? But when we're able to see it, yes, in the literature, then that helps us, like you said, a very important point, to take action, to realize that, okay, this is a reality. How can we come together and correct the situation, find solutions?
Yes, that's exactly right. So some people will be motivated by legal documents and reports, and other people are touched by the power of literature to take them inside the feelings and experiences of another. So it's one more way of accomplishing the same goals and reaching the same ends of advocacy and increasing human rights.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Kaplan. And actually, another point, the way that literature can really help us understand the reality that is happening is also realizing that what is being portrayed, like for example, if we take the example of novelas, like when we see these shows happening and portraying the reality in a very hyper romanticized way, right? And giving this feeling to women and girls that, oh, this is how the reality should be like. But then when they are caught themselves in this cycle of violence and not having the tools to come out of it, and seeing these kinds of images or stories that are not based on reality, it can reinforce that feeling of shame, and not making them want to expose or share about what is happening.
Yes, that's exactly right. So in the story I mentioned by Sandra Cisneros, the Latino author, the story called Woman Hollering Creek, the main character, a young woman from Mexico named Cleofilas, has grown up watching these telenovelas, or sort of TV soap operas, televised romantic stories, and wanting her life to conform to that. And even going out and with her very, very limited funds, buying special hair dye so that she can look like the main character on this telenovela, trying to conform her life to it. And in terms of the doctrine of self-completion, she's very far from it, because she doesn't see herself as complete unless she can get her life to conform to what the magazines and the telenovelas and the songs that she hears recommend about a certain kind of love. And then she finds herself in a relationship which she's entered into in a marriage because she thought it would fulfill that dream, and she finds a very different reality that she can't explain, and she just keeps measuring it by how far short it falls of this telenovela, this romantic ideal that's been embedded into her. And there are two sentences in the short story I'd like to share with you, if I may. And they are: the first time she was so surprised she didn't cry out or try to defend herself. She had always said she would strike back if a man, any man, were to strike her. We don't know until the end of the second sentence what actually went on in the first sentence, the first time she was so surprised she didn't cry out. And what the author, Sandra Cisneros, has done is to make us as readers just as surprised and confused as the main character is. The first time she was so surprised, the first time what happened? It doesn't say the first time he hit her, it's just the first time she was so surprised. We as readers are just as surprised because we're trying to figure out what's going on, just like the character. There's the empathy. And it turns out that her reaction is exactly what was talked about at the start of this broadcast: silence, numbness, inability to seek help. She always thought she would do what the characters do in the programs she watches. And then when it happens to her, she can't. And the story builds our understanding of someone who's in that situation when we ask, why didn't she strike back? Well, we're right there inside her mind with her, trying to figure out what's happening, just like she is.
And in this example that you're sharing, actually, it highlights the importance of the work that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is doing, particularly teaching the science of completion, understanding that the completion is not going to come from anything external, but it needs to happen from within. And also highlighting the importance of having the right Vata Varana, which means the environment, atmosphere around us. And as Swamiji says, as the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism says, he is creating the right Vata Varana so that we can raise in terms of individual consciousness, and then by being together, raising the collective consciousness. And so therefore coming out of these kinds of situations together as a whole, raising the frequency and putting an end to the cycle of violence. Yes, thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And so as conveyed by Dr. Middleton Kaplan, writing, literature, or other forms of writing can be a very powerful method to expose acts of violence, bring awareness and understanding about the urgency of situations, and create an international movement to address the crisis.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kaplan. So from this context, we will now present how Kailasa, founded by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, has, through various reports, contributed in bringing awareness to the violence perpetrated against women and girls, specifically the indigenous women and girls of minority traditions such as the Adi Shaivite minority tradition. So the United Nations has recognized the incessant persecution of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and of his community, especially the women and girls, and has published 4 reports from Kailasa. The reports is specifically focused on exposing acts of violence perpetrated against the indigenous women and girls in India. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So the first report is titled Media Disinformation in India. It was published by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, his Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Opinion and Expression. So the gist of it is that the report exposes that politicization and weaponization of the media is the root cause of misinformation in India, which has become a fundamental weapon for persecution of minorities in India. They are used in a systematic campaign of disinformation, creating negative public opinion, leading to coordinated mob attacks, lawfare, false cases. Trial by media campaigns prejudice the judges and the rest of the law enforcement system against the victims of the persecution. This leads to false convictions. Even if the victims are exonerated, these decisions come decades later, which leaves them financially bankrupt and defamed beyond repair, thereby destroying the mission. The example of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's community, the Adi Shaivite minority tradition, especially its women and girls, is an obvious example of this cycle of disinformation-based persecution.
So there is the second report that was published entitled Kailasa's Rights of Indigenous Women Report. This was published by the UN OHCHR Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women in June 2021. And essentially what this report explains in detail, it exposes that India is the most dangerous country for sexual violence against women, according to the Thomson Reuters Foundation 2018 survey. And according to the National Crimes Records Bureau, the rape of minor girls increased by 82% in the year 2016 compared with the previous year. So this means that it's almost double the amount of, or the number of rapes that happened in 2015. So this is quite astonishing to know. And sexual violence and brutal rape have been weaponized, against minority women and children by extremist militant elements at the highest level of governance. So this weaponization of sexual violence targeting women and children is part of a more pervasive and systematic campaign targeting certain indigenous spiritual traditions, minority communities and their leaders, especially those from linguistic and religious minority groups and of dark-skinned people of indigenous spiritual traditions, as well as those of ethnic native Hindu tribes that have existed in India for millennia.
The third report, Kailasa's Prevention of Femicide Report, was published by the UN OHCHR CHAR's Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, Its Causes and Consequences on date. And the report exposes that in the last decade, especially in India, there has been an alarming trend in the mainstream media and social media of sensational screening and manufacture of misinformation and hate speech that is marginalizing minority communities, especially targeting women with the use of image morphing and deep fake videos. So what has been done so far? This is a country where no legal recourse is available. In India, court orders are not upheld by the government. The Indian government and Indian state departments are in fact perceived as one of the most corrupt in the world. The mainstream Indian media and social media influencers exercise a massive influence on the masses and even the court judges. The media is easily able to sway public opinion and even sway the opinion of judges.
Now, the fourth report from Kailasa, published by the United Nations, Kailasa's Gender Justice and Freedom of Opinion and Expression report, was published by the United Nations OHCHR Special Reporter on the Promotion and Protection of Freedom of Opinion and Expression. And so this report exposes how Hindu female monks of the ASMT community were shamed for expressing their disciplehood as a father-daughter relationship with the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism by the Indian tabloids. So the media targeted the ASMT minor girls by publishing their pictures in the national newspapers with vulgar captions. And the young ASMT female monks were sexually linked with their guru, the spiritual guide and leader, by entire cover page and several pages of tabloids being dedicated to malign sacred sentiments of disciplehood. And so this smear campaign is not just limited to the ASMT women or ASMT female monks, but the most vulnerable target of this persecution are the ASMT girls, especially those minor girls who pursue religious studies to become nuns. And many of the ASMT girls who have now grown up to become nuns had grown up in the lap of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam, and strongly relate with him, not just as a guru, but as a father figure also. So it is not just extremely traumatizing for these girls to be sexually linked with the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism by the Indian media. It deeply undermines their freedom of expressing themselves as a divine mother figure, what their community sees them as. And so tabloids have specifically targeted minor ASMT girls, mentioning their name and age, while profanely addressing these girls as cult worshippers, child sex slaves. ASMT as a tradition fundamentally respects women as embodiments of the divine mother goddess, Devi Parashakti. And so it is extremely painful for the community to witness this smear campaign on ASMT women.
Yes, and in these 4 reports, Kailasa has given recommendations to put an end to the unabated cycle of violence against women and girls. Although the reports refer specifically to indigenous women and girls in India, Kailasa's recommendations are for the protection of women and girls worldwide. Let us look at some of the recommendations of Kailasa that were published by the United Nations. The first one is that women nuns who lead indigenous minority religious communities like the ASMT, the Adi Shaivite minority tradition, have been deprived of their human rights in their home country. The international community and member states of the United Nations need to support them by providing a safe place, protecting their basic human rights where they can practice their religion and revive their arts and traditions peacefully. The second recommendation There were close to 10,000 indigenous tribes and spiritual traditions in the Indian subcontinent that were mother worshippers and led by women. The ASMT is one of them. Colonization and invasions in ancient times and religious intolerance and caste-based violence and extremism in contemporary times have made them extinct. These women have been marginalized and labeled as witches and persecuted since time immemorial. Now is the time that the world needs to protect these traditions by internationally declaring them endangered. The third recommendation by Kailasa is that the victims of this new form of persecution, which involves deep fake and sophisticated smear campaigns, should be supported by condemnation of the violence and propaganda waged against them. The fourth recommendation, the use of deep fake videos for targeting women should be brought to check and condemned internationally.
So let us now look into the revival of the sacred matrilineal lineages by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. And as Vijaya Priya shared, Kailasa has beautifully summarized the solutions and some of the proposed activities or actions that we can take to prevent this form of violence. So the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism on November 6, 2021, declared to the world, and you should listen to this very carefully. Bhagwan says, women by their very DNA have the capacity, groundedness to hold an ecosystem, a family, a team, a community together. Keeping something very stable together and making it functional, women have their own intuitive intelligence in that field. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism further explains that Hinduism fundamentally respects and reveres women, as stated by the sacred Hindu scriptures in the Veda Agamas. And the Manusmriti beautifully shares here, women must be honored and adorned by their fathers, brothers, husbands, and brothers-in-law who desire their own welfare. And as per the Hindu scriptures, abusing and disrespecting women leads to inauspiciousness, as shared in this beautiful scriptural reference, where it translates, where women are honored, there the gods are pleased. But where they are not honored, no sacred rite yields rewards. And on July 5th, 2015, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism declared to the whole world that you won't find a single reference of a Hindu king, even if he conquers another kingdom, disrespecting women or raping them, imprisoning them or abusing them or using them. And I just remembered, back in 2010, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagwan Sri Nityananda Paramashivam, beautifully shared this quote, and he says, if all politics had been handed over to women, so much good would have happened to the human society and human civilization. If it had been handed over to women, we would have remained to this day a completely family-based civilization, which would have naturally ensured that everybody's basic needs were met. So in essence, nothing would have been exploited, misused, or wasted. This divine mother energy, feminine energy, is all about nurturing and bringing out the best in others. And I'm sure we can all relate to
To protect women and girls worldwide and to give them an environment in which they can thrive and manifest the peak of their potential, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has launched several progressive initiatives. And the first one is building Hindu ecosystem exclusively for women. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has taken the responsibility to build a grand ecosystem exclusively for women, the 64 Yogini Sarvanyapita, and the original 64 Yogini Sarvanyapita temple, the Chosat Yogini temple, was in Hirapur, Orissa, but the whole enlightened ecosystem was destroyed as a result of invasions. This is demonstrated by mutilation of deities of the 64 yoginis in Hirapur, Orissa, which carries a record of actual violence done to people, especially to the Hindu nuns and women. And the revival of the Yogini Sarvanyapita by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism stands as a revival in its grandest scale after thousands of years. Specifically, through the Yogini Sarvanyapita, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is reviving the 64 Yogini Sampradayas, the lineages, the Yoginis, Rudrakanyas, Rishikas, Kulasundaris, Swaminis, Nitya Sumangalis, and more. Through the Yogini Sarvanyapita, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is also working towards reviving all the great Vedic sciences, such as the Bhairavi Sampradaya and the Tantrika Sampradaya. Ultimately, the Yogini Sarvanyapita is designed to bring back the power and legitimacy of the ancient sacred matrilineal Sampradayas on planet Earth, which is necessary to achieve a peaceful and sustainable future. The Yogini Sarvanyapita, as per the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's vision, is the symbol of real feminism.
The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's vision for the Yogini Sarvanyapita, it will have a unique temple, monastery, university, and training center exclusively for women. It is meant to be funded only by women, operated and run only by women. It will also have centers for healthcare and huge hospitals for women centered around a temple complex. It will revive Ayurvedic and Siddha medicine. The Gurukul system, ancient Vedic education system which made the youth enlightened. The Analaya, the organic Hindu kitchen. The Hindu libraries, preserving sacred knowledge and making it accessible to all. So food, education, and healthcare will be free as per the Hindu Shastras, scriptures. All the spiritual, super conscious gifts from Kailasa will be shared with women. The Yogini Sarvanyapita will be the largest spiritual organization for women around the world and a place for women to go to for any spiritual need. Ultimately, the Yogini Sarvanyapita will have the capacity to welcome millions of women as residents, students, and powerful manifestors. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism shared this vision on June 21st, 2019. And when we look at the sacred Hindu scriptures, we can see the emphasis of the importance for all girls to be educated. Hindu history carries the records of extraordinary Hindu women scholars, such as Lopamudra, composer of hymns, Gosha, composer of hymns, Maitreyi, seer and philosopher, Gargi, composed several hymns questioning the origin of all existence. And so in the Rig Veda, it says, a scholarly woman, the entire life of society depends upon you. You provide us with the right knowledge. May you bring knowledge to all segments of society. Parents should give their daughter intellectuality and power of knowledge when she leaves for the husband's home. They should give her dowry of knowledge. And in Atharva, in this mantra of Brahmacharya Sukta, it is emphasized that girls too should train themselves as students and only then enter into married life. The Sukta specifically emphasizes that girls should receive the same level of training as boys. And so these evidences from the scriptures themselves really show how the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's work is always based on the scriptures.
Yes, and next is the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism ordains women into sannyas or monkhood and priesthood, giving women the opportunity to exercise their right as per the Hindu scriptures to conduct temple rituals. The Adi Shaivite minority tradition led by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism allows both men and women to become monks and to serve equally in all capacities. In order to bridge the gender gap and to bring equal rights, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism actively initiates women into sannyas and ordains them as priests in his monastic order, the Nityananda Sannyas Sampradaya. The ASMT is actually the only tradition with hundreds of female monks. In fact, there are more women sannyasis in the tradition than there are men. This is quite in contrast with every other tradition in the world, which are disproportionately dominated and controlled by men. The female sannyasis or nuns of the Nityananda Sannyas Sampradaya are given the equal rights in all aspects of their monastic life. For example, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has made it possible for women to conduct temple rituals, which is to this date unheard of in South India. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has also ordained women from the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and Dalit communities from marginalized sections of the society, which have been discriminated and sidelined by the neo-Hindutva ideologies.
So, when it comes to the science of completion, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has conducted thousands of online free programs, free of cost, to teach women the science of completion and powerful cognitions so that they can heal from the past traumas, whether individually or collectively. And through the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, through his teaching, his guidance, his initiations, women and girls across the world can realize their conscious sovereignty, which is the ultimate freedom of knowing that I am pure consciousness and I cannot be violated. And I'm sure many of the viewers, you would have attended several of these completion sessions, and I'm sure your lives would have been changed by the teachings of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and the powerful cognitions that he has given to us. So, teaching women and girls the science of completion and these powerful cognitions, as well as providing them with a safe and empowering, enlightened ecosystem in which each individual can flower and realize their own unique potential and rise as leaders, is the best we can do for women and girls, which is simultaneously the best thing we can do to create a peaceful and sustainable future. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has revived the Vedic feminism, and Kailasa is leading by example by giving 80% of the leadership positions to women. And the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism stands for the truth that women should be revered, and honoring women leads to a non-violent and sustainable future.
So today we've come together to further expose the shadow pandemic of violence against women. And we have here our esteemed guest, Dr. Middleton Kaplan again, scholar, writer, professor, humanitarian. And we also have a set of questions for you we'd like to address. So going to question number one, Dr. Middleton Kaplan, based on your understanding, how important is the science of completion and powerful cognitions as revived and shared with the whole world by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism for the empowerment of women and their communities.
Thank you. It's absolutely essential. And the story that I made mention of earlier, Sandra Cisneros' Woman Hollering Creek, illustrates that by showing us what happens when a woman does not have that sense of completion and seeks it in other ways that ultimately, when they prove destructive, she does not know how to get out of because she doesn't have any knowledge of a science or even a concept of completion. In the end of the story, she learns that from two other women. She becomes pregnant, the main character, Cleophilas, becomes pregnant and manages to convince her husband to let her go to a prenatal clinic for a prenatal appointment. Her husband is very opposed to this. He doesn't want to pay the cost. He's suspicious of her, but she goes. And a nurse at the prenatal clinic sees the bruises all over her body and calls a friend, and they are apparently part of a group that is quite accustomed to finding women who are victims of domestic violence and getting them away to safety. And that's what happens. And the main character achieves her sense of completion, selfhood, is moving on to a separate life because of the actions of these two other women who come in to support her. And it shows beautifully in the story what women can do for each other. And in a way, that nurse and her friend are advocates, are human rights activists, are working toward the same end. But the woman who had no knowledge of completion needed them to help her toward that. And I think it's the same work then going on in the story that that you've described and that Kailasa micronation is engaged in and the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is advocating and enacting.
Yes, thank you so much. And that's actually, very important perspective that you shared. And, that really helps us look in and tap into the emotions for solutions, actually for completion to move into, their next life. And this brings us to our next question. Thank you, Dr. Kaplan. Maswatantra Priya.
Thank you. Yes, Mama Katita. And actually, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism tells that life starts with completion. Completion needs to happen for us to be able to actually start experiencing life. Otherwise, it's always being stuck in the same patterns over and over and over again. And so healing and bringing completion in our inner space to be able to fully engage with others and with life with so much trust and reaching the peak of our potential. That is the power of completion. And so this brings us to our next question. Dr. Middleton Kaplan, from your perspective, what is the impact of the advocacy and revival work done by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism through Kailasa for the protection of women worldwide?
It's absolutely life-saving. That advocacy and revival work will give an avenue of rescue and an alternate life pattern for women trapped in this, and will also inspire those of us who have not yet engaged in advocacy to follow the model. So one of the things we know from studies of crowd behavior, when people are faced with something terrible taking place in front of them, they're often paralyzed. They don't know what to do. They don't want to intervene if something maybe isn't what they think it is. They're afraid to intervene. But once one person steps in and says this is wrong and takes action, others then can join that person. But it takes someone to be the first one to step forward and say, what is happening here is not right. And that is what the Supreme Pontiff is doing through advocacy. And then that gives people who don't have the internal resources to be the first one to step forward, to then step forward and join the effort that someone else has begun. It's nothing short of life-saving and life-giving for women who perhaps have seen no alternative, no way out, like the character in the story that I was talking about. She saw no help until two other women intervened and helped her. She didn't ask them. She didn't even know they existed, but they did. And so this advocacy and revival work is absolutely life-changing. As I said, life-saving, life-giving, life-changing.
It's beautiful when you share that it takes one person to start and give the confidence to everyone else that, yes, this is a possibility, this can be done. When we come together, we can create a new reality that is most powerful. And that is, as you said, exactly what the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is doing, and providing the right environment, as well as we were talking about earlier, the Vata Varana, which is most important, so that we can inspire each other also to race together and have that feeling of protection and confidence that together we can change things. So it's setting a new trend for the world on this important day of the elimination of violence against women and girls. And we really appreciate your insights and sharings, Dr. Middleton Kaplan. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. And we hope to see you again in future panels. And so this brings us to the end of this panel discussion. And we wish to thank each and every one of you attending from social media and sharing your insights. Every single voice matters. And as Dr. Middleton Kaplan was highlighting, it takes one person, but then when that momentum is created, we have so much power together. And we wish, yes, to thank each and every one of you. And we will be hosting more of these panels in the future, Kailasa Mission to the United Nations. And so stay tuned for the next ones, and we hope to see everyone there. And we will now be ending by chanting the Purna Mantra together. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sarvam Bhagavat Shri Nityananda Paramashivam Padukarpanamastu. Om Nityanandam.